3.074 trillion shillings. It has been allocated as follows: 1.67 trillion shillings for the national government, 17.768 billion shillings for the judiciary, Parliament, of which the National Assembly is one of the houses, has been allocated 42.548 billion shillings, 962.562 billion shillings for consolidated fund services, and another 372.742 billion shillings allocated for county revenues. This particular committee has also made a number of recommendations as regards reallocations, as regards deductions to this particular budget, and even additions. Some of the reallocations are that 15.215 million of the current heavy rains being experienced in parts of the country. A quorum has been achieved this morning. We shall have confirmation from the Deputy Speaker.
Order, members. Order. Now that we have quorum, business will begin. Order, members. Order. Especially people who are coalescing around the leader of minority. Proceed.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3,
registration of certified public secretaries board, state corporation appeal tribunal, subscription by the Kenya government to the international organizations, the Kenya accountants, and number 3, the report of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following constituencies for the year that ended 30th June 2016 and the certificate therein: Sabati constituency, Sabatia constituency, Kwesero constituency, Nambale constituency, Starehe constituency, and that's it, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay them on the table of the House.
Very well. Next order.
order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, procedural motion, exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 43.
I think leader of majority on this one again.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House orders that the business appearing as order number 9 in the order paper be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 40 subsection 3, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or the minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. Mr. Speaker, this is in line with the House Business Committee meeting last evening, where I was not there, but I had to read the minutes this morning. Members, because Wednesday morning is a day set aside for private members' business. We want to ask the House that they allow us to start the debate of the budget estimates based on the report tabled by the Chair of Budget, and Appropriation Committee, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah. So it's just a procedural so that it's agriculture, the chair for ICT, the chair for defense, education, energy, in that order. So all of them must be ready to take the cue once one of their own has completed giving his views or her views. So, Mr. Speaker, it's just
the government has to spell out how to raise money. They must raise money to finance something. So you cannot ask or expect the cabinet secretary to tell us that we'll be raising 2.5 billion or trillion, sorry, Mr. Speaker, 2.5 trillion, and yet Parliament has not decided on how much in total expenditure that should be incurred for the next financial year. So basically, that is why we felt that we should start this debate this morning, and if possible, finish it by. And the leader of majority is aware also that there is tax laws that is coming, which is supposed to be merged with finance bill so that there is no inconsistency. So this House has really a packed program that I think we may be called upon at times. The leadership may call upon members to put in extra hours just to be able to discharge our major responsibility.
Exempted from provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party or business sponsored by a committee. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of our contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order, but what is the point of order? Who is out of order? I've just put the question. Yes, proceed. You don't even seem to have a card.
I have a card, Mr. Speaker. It's not working. In fact, that's why I'm running on a point of order.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my point of order is that our cards are not working. Yesterday, they were being activated. They gave us the password. They worked briefly. Today, they're not working. So maybe you order the ICT director to move with speed so that members can be able to contribute. I'm not the only one. Actually, they're not working, apart from the majority leaders and minority leaders, Mr. Speaker. Those are the only two ones that are working, and yourself. Please. Thank you. Thank you.
That would obviously be very lucky for you if the working is specifically for the leadership, because you are one of them. We will somehow have some business being transacted. Let's proceed. Proceed. Proceed.
Order number 9, motion, debate on the President's address. Mover to reply.
Yes, leader of
our behalf, and I'm sure we, the leaders who represent the people of Kenya at the constituency level, need to take that gesture, that peace and reconciliation among our people down to the people. Secondly, and most important, Mr. Speaker, I am sure we are aware now in our country that the President has set a pace again in the war against corruption. And this House, Mr. Speaker, as a budget-making House, and a House that has an oversight role as per the Constitution, must be at the forefront in protecting the public resources. The people who elected us to this House, Mr. Speaker, have given us the powers to legislate, the powers to represent, and above all, the powers to oversight the budget that we make. And I really want to urge the departmental committees that today will make their presentation to the House and will oversight the billions that will be allocated to various departments that they do.
In these hospitals. Number 8, Honorable Speaker, is lack of extension services. Many farmers, notably the rice-growing farmers in Mwea, as well as farmers in the Rakanithi, require agricultural extension services, but these are lacking, and county governments in these areas need also to hasten efforts to provide these extension services, this being a devolved function. And at a policy level, the Ministry of Agriculture needs to work together with the county governments to ensure that these extension services are available to our farmers. Honorable Speaker, moving on to the committee's recommendations, having considered all the above matters, the committee recommends as follows. On policy recommendations, the public hearings on the budget should be done after the budget review and outlook paper has been submitted to Parliament, so that the projects arising from public consultations are included in the budget before the budget policy statement is finalized. This House should therefore amend the PFM law to ensure that the public participation on the budget is conducted in the months of October and November every year. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, we do expect, if we're able to do this by October, to conduct our public hearings for the next financial year of 2019-2020 by October, November of this year. Two, that given the large projects being initiated by the national government with contractual agreements which Parliament only gets to know about later, any contractual agreement worth more than Kenya shillings 1 billion should be pre-approved by Parliament beginning 1st July 2018. Three, that given the importance of finalizing ongoing projects, particularly in infrastructure, manufacturing, and the agriculture sector, resources allocated for this project should be ring-fenced and a proper monitoring and evaluation framework be put in place to ensure that these projects are completed within the stipulated time frame. Any budgetary changes within the year should not affect projects related to manufacturing unless substantial reasons are given or provided along with a plan on how this will be mitigated. This is to forestall the cases that we have seen of very many stalled projects that are important and critical for the growth of our economy, especially in the manufacturing sector, that ought to spur not just economic growth, but also create job opportunities for hundreds and millions of our unemployed youth. Four, that a list of all pending bills should be provided by the National Treasury, and they should be given priority in the 2018-2019 budget to limit actual accrual of penalties in various MDAs. Five, that the government considers expanding the current leasing framework for motor vehicles from for the entire public service, as opposed to purchasing vehicles, as this is quite expensive. To borrow from the National Police Service, government to roll out more of leasing, and we were assured by the National Treasury that they are indeed carrying out an audit of the leasing program of the police vehicles to be able to roll this out to other areas in government. Six, that an audit of Mitihani House, Umadam, Kirdi Laboratories in South B, the Civil Servants Housing Scheme in Makueni, and other major stalled government projects, including the sports stadiums across the country, be carried out by the departmental committees in liaison with the MDAs to determine why these projects have taken so long to complete, and a report presented to this House. This project should be prioritized for completion over the medium term, as they have consumed a significant amount of taxpayers' money and still continue to incur costs without yielding any returns to the people of Kenya who are contributing to these taxes. Honorable Speaker, as I mentioned, case in point of Umadam has stalled for many years. Mitihani House in South Sea has been under construction, Honorable Speaker, for the last 35 years, when I was only 5 years old. Seven, that moving forward, the government should pursue the public-private partnership framework, model along the PPP framework, which has been adopted by the Office of the Auditor General for designing and construction of the Auditor General's headquarters at Upper Hill in Nairobi. Once finalized, this building can also host offices of other ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as those offices of other independent constitutional offices, thereby achieving value for money for taxpayers. It is a considered view of the committee that going forward, this will be the best model for implementing capital projects in construction of buildings by government agencies, other than sinking public funds into building buildings that we can achieve through a PPP model. That a performance audit of the managed equipment service equipment be carried out to ensure value for money. 10, that a performance audit of the CT scan project be also carried out to ensure that there is value for money in this project. 11, that the national government should improve on policy with regard to agricultural extension services and ensure that all counties are offering these services. 12, that within the allocation for fertilizer subsidy, Kenya shillings 1 billion being fenced for coffee farmers around the country. 13, that the budgetary allocations for Parliament and that of Judiciary should be based on a 7.5% annual increase on their recurrent budget. Thus, discussions will be held on allocative efficiency and not ceilings, and that development budget allocation be contested on a need basis. 14, and last, is that the development budget should not be subject to deductions during the supplementary budget, and that this House should not and must not approve any such deductions should they occur during supplementary budgets. On financial recommendations, Honorable Speaker, the committee recommends recommendations arising from public hearings. Honorable Speaker, the committee came up with 3 priority areas that need to be urgently addressed, namely water, roads, and basic social services, that's in healthcare and education. The committee therefore recommends the following: that to address the water needs, the following allocations be made. In Kajiado County, Kajiado East, Kajiado South, to receive Kenya shillings 15 million and 20 million respectively for water pans for holding holding flood waters to be used for irrigation of pasture and drinking water for animals. Marsabit County, drilling of boreholes to earth dams for water to be used for irrigation, drinking water for animals and other domestic use. Kenya shillings 20 per constituency, amounting to a total of 80 million shillings. In West Pokot County, a feasibility design and compensation of land to facilitate construction of the Kaprom Dam, 100 million Kenya shillings. That improvement of roads and other infrastructure is an urgent and critical need around the country. Cognizant of the fact that long-term tarmacking will take time, the committee has set aside funds for the following counties for the development of all-weather roads and other infrastructure to be distributed in the following manner. In Nairobi County, Rirota Dagureti Kawangware Road C63, Kenya shilling 60 million. In Nakuru County, construction of Kuresoi North Sub-County DCC's office and the road access roads, Kenya shillings 30 million. Rehabilitation of roads in Nakuru East, 10 million. Rehabilitation of roads in Bahati constituency, Naivasha constituency, and Gilgil constituencies in Nakuru County, 10 million shillings each. In Bungoma County, the county be given Kenya shillings 100 million for repair of the following roads: Tarbo, Naitiri, Sikendu Road, C44. The road covers 3 constituencies, that is Tarbo, Tongaren, and Kiminini. Construction of Emia Road in Kopsiro area to help in movement of agricultural goods. In Nyamira County, rehabilitation of various roads upgrading 100 kilometers in Borabu constituency, Kitutu Masaba constituency, North Mugirango constituency, West Mugirango constituency, Kenya shillings 10 million shillings each to each. In Migori County, rehabilitation of various roads and construction of box culverts. In Suna East constituency, 20 million shillings. Suna West, 15. Uriri, 10. Nyatike, 15. Kuria West, 10. Kuria East, 15. Awendo constituency, 15. Rongo constituency, 10 million. In Mombasa County, Aldina Mikanjuni Road, connecting the 2 wards of Njomvu, that is Mikindani Ward and Njomvu Ku Ward. A 3-kilometer stretch, resealing, 15 million shillings. In Tharaka Nithi County, rehabilitation of various roads in Mara constituency, 10 million shillings. Tharaka constituency, 10 million shillings. Kirinyaga County, rehabilitation of various roads in Mwea constituency and Gishugu constituency, 15 million shillings each. Kirinyaga constituency, 5 million shillings, and Dia constituency, 5 million shillings each. That to improve street lighting, 3, to improve street lighting in counties that express critical need, the following allocations be made. In Nairobi County, street lights, Ebalezi, Karinde, Karen, Getiba, Mutoine, 5 million shillings. Street lights in Embakasi, Central Embakasi, North Embakasi, West and Mathare constituencies, Kenya shillings 15 million. Mombasa County, installation of street lights on roads in Changamwe, 5 million shillings. 4, that funds allocated for bridges be distributed in the following manner. In Makueni County, Dhwake Bridge, Kenya shillings 150 million for completion of this bridge that will cut the distance from 2 constituencies to water headquarters by a distance of 120 kilometers. People have to travel a distance of 140 kilometers because of that bridge. And completion of that one bridge will make the distance, cut the distance by almost 115 kilometers to 25 kilometers to access water, the county headquarters of Makueni. Olesuya Konabaridi Bridge in Kajiado Central, connecting Kajiado Central to Kajiado West, 100 million Kenya shillings. That to improve basic infrastructure in public schools, the following allocations be made. In Nakuru County, reconstruction of Solai School, Kenya shillings 20 million. These are the two schools, Honorable Speaker, that were washed away by the flood from the Patel Dam, the unfortunate incident in Solai in Nakuru County. In Tharaka Nithi County, construction of classrooms in Kamotuandu Primary School, which, Honorable Speaker, you remember the member for Tharaka who I had seen in this house earlier, and Senator for Tharaka Nithi, were featured on social media constructing mud walled classrooms. The Budget and Appropriations Committee has stepped in to ensure that the children in this particular school no longer attend a mud walled school, and have allocated 10 million shillings towards the construction of classrooms and an administration block for that particular school. In Kirinyaga County, upgrading of St. Augustine Mwea Boys High School, 10 million shillings in Mwea constituency. 20 million shillings, Honorable Speaker, number 6, to be allocated to the Coast General Hospital in Mombasa County for construction of a drugs rehabilitation center, reconstruction of a dilapidated drugs rehabilitation center because of the challenges of drugs abuse in the coast. 7, that 70 million shillings be set aside for the construction of a social innovation center in Tharaka Nithi County. 8, that 40 million shillings be set aside for fencing of the Kapenguria Museum to protect our national heritage for future generations. Mr. Speaker, given resource constraints, the committee could not provide for every expenditure request from the public. However, all requests received from the public have been compiled and can be found in Annex 2 of our report. Some of the critical needs highlighted by counties not hosting public hearings, as well as through written memoranda, include the following. From Kwale County, who participated in Mombasa, rehabilitation of Madibwani Primary in Kinango constituency, rehabilitation of Zuho Ramawe Primary School in Kinango constituency. From Meru County, rehabilitation of various roads, notably in Imenti South constituency. Busia County, construction of Nambale, Busibwaho, Mundika, Mayenje, Busia Road. The road covers Nambale and Matayos constituencies. Mr. Speaker, even within centers where public hearings were held, not all expenditures needs could be met. Some of the critical needs not allocated resources include from Marsabit County, construction of 2 bridges in Sololo region in order to connect Sololo town to other neighboring towns, and more importantly, control and reduce the effects of floods in the area. The 2 proposed bridges are Malka, Dulacha, Kalu, and Karibururi. The construction of KMTC in Marsabit County to increase health personnel by enhancing local training. Construction of Marsabit-Wajir Road to open up the region to the neighboring counties to ease free movement of people and goods. The tarmacking of Moyale-Dabil Road to bitumen standards so as to open the region in other counties for ease of movement of people and goods. In Nakuru County, construction of a 200-capacity hostel at Naivasha Technical Training Institute, and construction of a youth polytechnic or tertiary college in Joro. Kirinyaga County, the construction of Kirinyaga Industrial Park, a tomato and French beans processing plant in Mwea. The Tharaka Nithi County, construction of Bututia, Godhiro Laingo, Kadhina Dams, and the completion of Rogoti Bridge. Nyamira County, establishment of fresh produce processing plants for agricultural value addition, drilling of mega boreholes to serve residents, learning institutions, and health facilities. In Migori County, establishment of a fish processing plant and conversion of the Migori TTC into a fully fledged university. In West Pokot, a honey processing plant, conversion of Migori TTC into a university, honey processing plant and construction of West Pokot airstrip, repair and rehabilitation of bridges on Makutano Kacheliba Road. Honorable Speaker, I don't want to go through the entire list, and I will ask that you add me 1 minute to conclude just on the public participation, because, Honorable Speaker, you remember from the 11th Parliament, this was a very touchy issue, but we decided as a Budget and Appropriations Committee this time round to be a bit magnanimous and go out even to counties that were not represented in the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And as I have mentioned, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that over the next 4 years we have covered all the counties. And even in counties where we visit and neighboring counties come and you're not able to accommodate them within the resource envelope, to recommend them for future allocation of resources. I don't want to go through the entire list, Honorable Speaker, because all these issues are highlighted in our report. They are all highlighted in the report, and members will be able to go through the entire list. But it is worth noting, Honorable Speaker, from the allocations and the deductions that we have done from various ministries, as I mentioned, Honorable Speaker, the National Youth Service has lost 8.24 billion Kenya shillings. Other MDAs that have been mentioned adversely in both public investments and public accounts reports and other reports or be under investigation by investigative agencies. Honorable Speaker, we have also made effort to deduct funds allocated to them and reallocate the same resources to other critical areas. Honorable Speaker, we have also made efforts to incorporate many of the proposals that came from our departmental committees in terms of reallocations of resources from what departmental committees perceived to be non-critical areas to the more critical areas that departmental committees in their conversations with MDAs came across. Further, the committee recommends that this House resolves to approve the report and the recommendations of Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and parliament for the financial year 2018-2019. Approve that Schedule 1 attached to this report forms the basis of the Appropriations Act for 2018-2019. And C, approve that the National Treasury finalizes the required budget documents as per the Public Finance Management Act on detailed estimates, and in addition, for their very hard work and dedication in making sure that Parliament lives to its budgetary oversight role. Mr. Speaker, the chairs of various departmental committees delivered to the Budget and Appropriations Committee reports, which were well organized, and this was very commendable. The consolidated reports are contained in Annex 3 of this report. Mr. Speaker, the committee is also grateful to the public for having turned up in large numbers to take part in the public hearings, as well as those who took their time to send written memoranda to Parliament, and to the members of Parliament who, though not being members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, took time out of their busy schedules to attend public hearings on the national budget in constituencies and counties that we visited, some going out of their way. Like case in point is Mheshimiwa Kadhuri Kamashinani, who took time to attend the public hearing in the neighboring county of Tharaka Nithi, all the way from Meru County. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the committee is grateful to the Office of the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Office of the Clerk of the National Assembly, the clerks to departmental committees, and the Parliamentary Budget Office for the support received as it discharged its mandate of reviewing the printed estimates for the financial year 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore my pleasant undertaking on behalf of the Budget and Appropriations Committee to table this report and recommend it to the House for adoption. Honorable Speaker, I cannot trace where my vice chair is seated. I will ask the indomitable member of our Budget Committee, the Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, a seasoned economist, to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Yes, even as he seconds, let me recognize in the Speaker's gallery the presence of students from Precious Blood Secondary School, Riruta, from Dagoretti constituency, Nairobi County, and Langata West Primary School from Langata, Nairobi County. Okay, let's have Honorable Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to second this year's budget, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I must thank my chairman for moving this report. But Mr. Speaker, I want to register also my complaint because I'm being just be go to second without even any preparation. But let me just give it a shot, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will not dwell much on the figures because I think the chair has done that, and I'm sure the departmental chairs will do that. But I just want to take this time, Mr. Speaker, to highlight some of the key findings of the Budget Committee in terms of what I will call the overall budget-making process, Mr. Speaker. So I want just to point out a few items of this budget, Mr. Speaker, which I think they are worthy noting as a House. The first item, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of making resources available for MDAs or ministries, departments, and agencies which have an audit query, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think time has come for this House to be firm on this position. Mr. Speaker, this House is lucky to have all the oversight committees, and more so, I want to single a few of them. The PAC, the PIC, and the Special Funds Committee, Mr. Speaker, which actually take time and look at the accounts of all these MDAs. And Mr. Speaker, I think time has come for this House to make sure that the recommendations of PAC, recommendations of PIC, and recommendation of the Special Accounts Committee are factored into the budget-making process. This, Mr. Speaker, will make sure that agencies and ministries which have audit queries, Mr. Speaker, will only get resources which they can then, Mr. Speaker, use without any problem. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, I want just to mention is the issue of the development budget, Mr. Speaker. I want to support my chairman from what he has said that as a House, we need to protect development budget. Once this House passes the development budget, Mr. Speaker, it is important that as a House, we don't allow any reduction. Why am I saying this, Mr. Speaker? The reason I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, is because all the projections in terms of economic growth, projections in terms of revenue generation are actually anchored on the development budget. And once you reduce the development budget, Mr. Speaker, more likely those other variables will be affected and affected in a negative way, Mr. Speaker. So it's important as a House, Mr. Speaker, that we protect development budget once we pass it, Mr. Speaker. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, I want to raise or talk about is the issue of the public hearings, Mr. Speaker. The timing. My chairman has said, Mr. Speaker, that we need to think seriously about the timing of the public hearings. The reason why we are saying this is because when we interact with the public, Mr. Speaker, the needs which the public are presented to the Budget Committee are so much that they cannot be accommodated just after the key process of the budget-making process, that is the policy statement and the announcements have been prepared. So what the chair is proposing, Mr. Speaker, and I think all members you need to note, is that we need to bring public hearings to either November or October so that once we collect all these needs, then they can be factored into the budget from a perspective that it will now allow, because now we are a bit restricted with the resources. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of the managed equipment services. Mr. Speaker, as my chair was presenting, he has mentioned what we call the medical equipment service and the CT scanners, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we have found out as a budget committee is that implementation of programs is facing challenges. And this is, Mr. Speaker, we associate it to the fact that we don't think, Mr. Speaker, proper project or program appraisal is being done. And I think time has come, Mr. Speaker, when as a House, we must demand that all MDAs must do proper project appraisal because any funding is committed. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to support the proposal that we need to note as a House. The other issue I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of the storage projects. Mr. Speaker, it's a country, and this is all over the place. I'm sure if we were to talk to individual members here, Mr. Speaker, you realize that each one of our constituencies has a stored government project. And Mr. Speaker, what we are saying is, as a government, money has been committed to these stored projects. Isn't it not wise, Mr. Speaker, that as a House, we demand that all stored projects are completed before we start new projects? And I think if we go that way, Mr. Speaker, we will be helping this country in terms of, Mr. Speaker, achieving the targeted economic growth and also making sure that Kenyans really benefit from the intended kind of resource from this project, Mr. Speaker. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, which I want to talk about is the issue of what the chairman has said in terms of sharing the public hearings money, Mr. Speaker. You realize, Mr. Speaker, the budget is not much. It's just about $1 billion. And when you look through, Mr. Speaker, what has been shared to individual constituencies, you realize, Mr. Speaker, there's much more which has not been shared. And most of the constituencies have not benefited. But I want to assure honorable members, what we have done as a committee, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure that over time, we will be able, Mr. Speaker, to reach all the constituencies. So the planning for the budget committee is in the 4 years, which are coming, every county will be visited, and they will be able to benefit from public hearings. What am I saying? I'm just assuring honorable members that they should not be worried that your county was not visited this year. Next year, we'll visit different counties. The other year, we'll visit other counties. At the end of the 4 years, Mr. Speaker, every county will have benefited, and then you'll also get projects. I've seen, Mr. Speaker, you are lucky already something close. I saw close being mentioned somewhere. But it means next year, when we go down to another county, then you will not benefit next year, but that will benefit then the other years, Mr. Speaker. And that what we are saying now, unlike 11th Parliament, where some constituencies benefited and others didn't benefit, Mr. Speaker, this time the Budget Committee is working in a very structured manner to make sure that all honorable members get projects, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other issue I want to talk about is the whole issue of monitoring and evaluation, Mr. Speaker. Monitoring and evaluation. Honorable members, actually what we call oversight is purely monitoring and evaluation. And I want to urge committees and chairpersons of committees, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that you take time, since we are going now to appropriate for your MDS as a house, it is your work immediately the money is released to make sure that you track implementation. And what we have realized, Mr. Speaker, is when we are planning like now, we have very clear outputs. We have very clear outcomes. We have very clear target dates which have been proposed. But as we continue the implementation, we lose track of achievement of those performance indicators, Mr. Speaker. And I think departmental committees will be helping this house in a great way, Mr. Speaker, if they take time to make sure that this is what is planned in terms of outputs, in terms of targets, and as a committee, you go that extra mile to make sure that you track implementation. That is the aim and aspect of this process, Mr. Speaker. And really, I want to appreciate Mr. Speaker, as the chair said, this year, Mr. Speaker, chairpersons of the committees have actually gone that extra mile and participated very actively in the budget making process. And to me, I think that is very important. The last item I want to speak about, Mr. Speaker, is the public debt. Mr. Speaker, as a committee, we are cautioning the government that even as we continue borrowing from outside and internally, let's bear in mind that, Mr. Speaker, basic principles of public debt management demand that you need to balance what we call intergenerational interest in terms of public borrowing, so that we don't overburden future generations in paying these debts, which we are taking today, Mr. Speaker. So it is important that even though every time Treasury keeps on saying we are within the international indicators, Mr. Speaker, we want to bear in mind that Kenya is a growing country, and we must take care of our future generations. We don't want to overburden our children paying loans which were taken by us, and then they will not be able to move as a country that time, Mr. Speaker. So it is important as a house, we always keep on protecting for future generations by making sure that, Mr. Speaker, that then as a house, we control public borrowing. Last but not least, the issue of corruption, Mr. Speaker. As a house, I want to support my chairman. It is time we said no to corruption. So, Mr. Speaker, NMDA, which is seen to be corrupt, we must, as a house, reduce the resources. This year, we have started with NOIS. Very soon, National Serial Body should follow, pipeline will follow. Anybody confirmed to be corrupt should not be appropriated resources for by this house, Mr. Speaker. And I think that's a message you want to send. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to second and say thank you very much.
Okay, order members, order, order. I propose a question which is that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and Parliament for financial year 2018-2019, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 15th June 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 2213 of the Constitution of Kenya, Section 39 of the Finance Public Finance Management Act 2012, and Standing Orders 235 and 239 approves the issuance of Kenya shillings 1.742 billion, 1,742,291,667,9. Sorry, honorable members. Mathematics can be difficult. 1 trillion. We are at 1 trillion, honorable members. 1,742,000,000. Did you say billion? So I'll start it again, honorable members. 1,742,291,667,908 shillings from the consolidated fund to meet the expenditure during the year ending 30th June 2019 in respect of the votes and programs as contained in the schedule. Honorable members, we will now have the chairs contributing, and we'll do it in an alphabetical manner, starting with the Administration and National Security Committee Chairman, will be followed by the Agriculture and Livestock Chairman, will therefore come to Communication, Information and Innovation, just for purposes of preparation, honorable members. Then the fourth one will be Defense and Foreign Relations. There will be Education and Research, Energy, Environment, Finance, Health, Justice and Legal Affairs, Labor and Social Welfare, Lands, Sports, Culture and Tourism, Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Transport, Public Works and Housing, in that order. And honorable members, I had promised a member who wanted to make his he wanted to make his maiden speech, but unfortunately he will not be able to make it in the morning. I believe he will have an opportunity in the afternoon. That is the member for Vihiga. So you continue preparing, honorable member. We'll still have an opportunity in the afternoon, and you will contribute. So let's start with the Chair, Administration and National Security, Honorable Koinange. Proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the budget estimates that have come at a time when our security environment is improving from the tensions that characterized the 2017 general elections, though terrorism, juvenile gangs, and cattle rustling still pose a major security threat in some areas of our country. Honorable Speaker, I am happy to note that the significant resources have been proposed in this budget towards improving our security environment. The State Department for Interior, with a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 124.9 billion, will continue focusing on the following areas: sealing up investments towards modernization of security systems aimed at strengthening security of our borders and throughout the country, enhance security operations on agenda of food security and nutrition. The State Department for Interior will sensitize the public through regular barazas on the importance of water harvesting and planning of drought-tolerant crops. The department will also provide security to all our water infrastructure towers. Honorable Speaker, to support manufacturing with the proposed allocation, from now henceforth, our security sector shall not allow any counterfeit goods into our economy. Honorable Speaker, the war has already started, and we are not relenting. Let us all appreciate the fact that illegality of imported goods only benefit the smugglers as they are sold to our unsuspecting consumers at the normal market rates. Yet, the same products buy our government huge revenues. Some of these products are also pose a serious security threat to our people's health, example being food products and medicine. Proceeds from this illicit trade may also fund terrorism if not checked. Honorable Speaker, the State Department of Correctional Services, with the proposed allocation, will contribute towards provision of universal health care by providing 27,000 prison officers and their families with medical cover. They will also construct 9 health facilities in Kisii, Makueni, Kihancha, Kajiado, Mwingi, Maranjao, Kitengela, Kaloleni, and Shikusa. Under the Food and Nutrition Security, the State Department will target mechanization of prison farms to increase food production. Under industrial production, manufacturing, and agro-processing, the prisons will revitalize leather industry in Kitengela prison to process 10,000 square feet of leather per month, as well produce 100 shoes per day. The prison will further produce 4,000 secure number plates from the current rate of 2,000 number plates per day. Honorable Speaker, my committee, however, notes with concern the slow pace of implementation of development projects within the security sector arising out of limited funds for capital spending. For example, Honorable Speaker, a review of projects under the presidency reveals that it is implementing a total of 13 projects with an estimated cost of Kenya shilling 13.5 billion in the financial year 2018-2019, and in the medium term, Kenya shillings 1.18 billion, Kenya shillings 1.57 billion, and 1.641 billion has been proposed for allocation across the various projects. The total allocation in the medium term amounts to Kenya shilling 4.4 billion against an estimated cost of 13.5 billion, giving a deficit in resource requirement of Kenya shilling 9.1 billion. The State Department for Interior will be implementing 149 projects in the financial year 2018-2019, and the medium term, whose estimated cost amount to Kenya shilling 114 billion, with a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 15.6 billion. The allocation will be financed by Government of Kenya at Kenya shilling for 15.1 billion and Kenya shilling 429 million through external funding, respectively. Honorable Speaker, the committee has recommended that the project be implemented by having the unfinished projects of medium term 2 of Vision 2030 completed before other projects can be introduced in the third medium-term plan of Vision 2030. Honorable Speaker, in view of the newly established sub-counties which require significant resources towards the establishment of offices, the committee recommends shilling 570 million be reallocated from the National Security Surveillance Project to fund construction of a third of the newly created sub-counties. The committee shall be recommending to this House to consider appropriating resources for other counties in the subsequent years to enable construction of these newly created sub-counties be completed in 3 years' time, and avoid many projects at once which may escalate into pending bills, which often disrupts the implementation of the budget every year. Honorable Speaker, the committee also noted with concern the historical pending bills, which keep on disrupting the implementation of the budget every year. The State Department has one of the highest pending bills in the government. The committee recommends that a comprehensive audit of all pending bills be verified and validated, and thereafter provide for an allocation to settle the pending bills once for all. Honorable Speaker, the committee also noted rising cases of court injunctions on government constructions arising out of insufficient documentation of ownership of land where such constructions are ongoing. To this end, the committee recommended Kenya shilling 20 million be provided under the State Department for Interior to compensate the owners of plots taken over by the government.
Mr. Chairman, just remind the honorable chairpersons, you will have a maximum of 10 minutes, not more than that. But Mr. Chairman, because you are the first, and because the other chairs will be learning from you, I'll add you 2 minutes to conclude, but any other subsequent chair shall have a maximum of 10 minutes.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The committee also noted rising cases of court and are made. Honorable Speaker, I conclude the committee has resolved to carry out its mandate of oversight extra vigor because we believe that to establish how many police houses we have in the first place and who occupies the houses, we cannot afford to have some officers being allocated more than one house unit with then they rent out to civilians while their colleagues share houses. I want to urge all our committees of this Honorable House to be extra vigilant in their oversight role. Let us not delegate our constitutional mandate of oversight. Honorable Speaker, let me end by congratulating the Budget and Appropriation Committee of the National Assembly for a job well done. Keep it up. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Very well. Now we shall have the chair of Agriculture and Livestock.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me to sit in for my chair who is away. Honorable Speaker, the proposed allocation to the agriculture sector in 2018-19, Honorable Speaker, is 57.8 billion, composed as follows, Honorable Speaker. State Department for Crops is 25.253 billion. State Department for Livestock is 6.258 billion. State Department for Research is 5.561 billion. State Department for Fisheries is 2.791 billion. State Department for Irrigation is 17.976 billion, totaling to 57.841 billion. Honorable Speaker, it's important to note that the share of the agriculture budget has been stagnant at 2% for the last 2 years and is projected to maintain the trend over the medium term. Honorable Speaker, arising from the Maputo Declaration, agriculture is supposed to have 10%, out of which Maputo Declaration Kenya is a signatory, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, other than lack of adequate budgetary provision, the sector is also faced with a number of challenges, and key amongst them being the spread of fall armyworm in maize growing areas, particularly in Rift Valley and western part of the country, which is likely to affect maize production in the country. The Department of Crop Development requested for 826 million under Supplementary 2 to mitigate against the effect of fall armyworm. However, there was no allocation to the department for the item. In 2018-2019, the department was allocated 300 million to contain the spread and adverse effect of the worm. It is important to note that if the devastation of the fall armyworm is not contained adequately, it has the potential to derail the government Big Four agenda, particularly on food security and nutrition. Honorable Speaker, the country is also faced with acute shortage of fertilizer and inefficiency in its distribution to farmers, which are serious repercussions for the country's food security. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, the fertilizer subsidy program by the government covers only 30% of the country's needs, and therefore there is need for enhanced funding for the program. In 2017-18 program, it was allocated 5.6 billion. However, the allocation to the program has been reduced in 2018-2019 to 4.3 billion, translating to a 23.2%. Honorable Speaker, the government has pending bills of 3.5 billion owed to farmers who supplied maize to the National Cereals and Produce Board, and a further 5.8 billion under the UNGA subsidy program owed to millers who supplied the subsidized flour. Honorable Speaker, the committee noted the modernization of machinery and equipment at the Kenya Meat Commission, which is said to stall due to inadequate funding by the government. The project was allocated 500 million in 2017-2018. However, the department received 125 million, out of which its allocation and the rest was removed from the supplementary budget. This will escalate the department's pending bills and subject it to possible litigation, given that there is a contractor on site who is undertaking the modernization works for the organization. It is important to note that there was allocation for the project in 2018-2019. However, Honorable Speaker, in view of the myriad of challenges faced by the sector, and the committee has made the following recommendations to the Budget and Appropriation Committee, some of which have been captured in the report. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I move to the recommendations of the committee. We made it in various sections. We have the policy recommendation, Honorable Speaker. The share of agriculture budget has been stagnant at 2% as a policy in the last 2 years and is projected to maintain in the trend in the medium term. This is despite the fact that the government signaled to the Maputo Declaration, which has called on African governments to spend a minimum of 10% of the budget on agriculture. Therefore, the committee recommends in the subsequent budgets, Honorable Speaker, the sector budget should be increased to 5% of the overall budget, given the critical role the sector plays in the economy, particularly its contribution to the Big Four agenda. Honorable Speaker, on the financial recommendations, reallocations, the committee recommends the reallocation of 100 million shillings meant for the establishment of disease-free zones. The committee decision is informed by the lack of clear justification for the project, given that the country is not likely to export meat to outside markets in the near future. The committee therefore recommends the reallocation of the funds to the following areas. 1, reallocation of 85 million to Kenya Meat Commission for the settling of pending bills owed to farmers which were incurred during the drought mitigation period through the animal offtake program. 2, reallocation of 15 million shillings to the program of general administration, planning and support services, specifically to the Directorate of Policy, Regulation and Research. Honorable Speaker, we also made proposed increment to our budgets. The State Department of Agriculture. Honorable Speaker, the committee recommends an additional allocation of 9.3 billion outside the ceiling for the State Department, composed of 3.5 billion for settling pending bills owed to farmers and 5.8 billion owed to millers under the UNGA subsidy program. Livestock State Department of Livestock. The committee recommends an additional allocation of 300 million outside the ceiling for the department to the Kenya Meat Commission for settling of pending bills owed to farmers which were incurred during the drought mitigation period through the animal offtake program. 2, the Kenya Meat Commission was allocated 500 million in the financial year 2016-2017 for modernization of its infrastructure. However, the department received 125 million out of its allocation, and the rest was moved through the supplementary budget. There is contractor on site who is undertaking the modernization works for the organization, who has submitted a certificate whose value is 375 million shillings. Therefore, the committee recommends an additional allocation of 375 million for settling pending bills arising from the ongoing modernization and re-engineering of Kenya Meat Commission. 3, the State Department of Irrigation. Honorable Speaker, the committee recommends the approval of the department budget as contained in the budget estimates for financial year 2018-2019. In the subsequent budgets, the department budget should be increased to 5% of the overall budget, given the critical role the sector plays in the economy, particularly in contribution to the Big Four agenda of the country. 4, State Department of Fisheries. The committee recommends the approval of the departmental budget as contained in the budget estimates for financial year 2018-2019. In the subsequent budgets, the department budget should be increased to 5% of the overall budget as it is requested and above. Honorable Speaker, 5, the State Department of Irrigation Research. The committee recommends the approval of the departmental budget as contained in the budget estimates for 2018-2019. In the subsequent budgets, the department budget should be increased to 5% of the overall budget, given the critical role the sector plays in the economy. Honorable Speaker, in overall, I want to thank the Departmental Committee, the Budget Committee, for giving us the chance to hear our presentation, and I want to thank all the members for attending the sessions of the committee. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Mr. Chairman, you took exactly 9 minutes, so I see now you have caught the spirit. The next one is the Chair of Communication, Information and Innovation. Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support the Chairman Budget and Appropriation Committee on this budget. Mr. Speaker, the ICT sector is a major enabler of the Big Four agenda. For instance, digitization of houses and medical records will positively impact the villas, affordable housing, and the universal, timely and also correct warnings of the rains. By setting up two local assemblies, Honorable Speaker, the Ministry of ICT is setting up two local assembly lines for laptops and other devices to manufacture devices for our students. Currently, we have an assembly line at Moi University in Eldoret, in Washingishu County, and one at Jomo Kenyatta University in Washingishu County, in Kiambu County. Mr. Speaker, over the years, the ministry has suffered perennial budget cuts as well as delayed budget releases from the exchequer. If you remember, in the last financial year, which is during the supplementary one, the budget for Ministry of ICT was cut by 75%, and this has adversely hampered the performance of the sector. We have so many huge pending bills that have resulted from this, as well as stalled projects. This, Honorable Speaker, has hampered the implementation of the projects under the ministry, as well as delays in service delivery. Among the projects that have suffered the underfunding are the Konza Technopolis City and the completion of the Presidential Digital Program and the Ajira Program. Honorable Speaker, in the last parliament, the government promised to ensure all our students in class 1 receive the devices, but as of this year, Honorable Speaker, we have about 3,000 schools that have not received the devices. Mr. Speaker, in this financial year 2018-2019, the ministry intends to review the ICT sector and legal regulatory framework. It will also roll out 2,500 kilometers of national optic fiber backbone phase 2 expansion to connect all sub-county headquarters, hospitals, and public institutions. This also, Honorable Speaker, the ministry will implement the digital literacy program in 3,000 remaining schools. As I had said, Honorable Speaker, we intend to complete the Konza Complex Project Phase 1 and formulate policies to guide public communication and broadcasting. In this financial year, Honorable Speaker, the ministry intends to restructure and re-engineer Kenya Broadcasting Corporation so that they compete like the other private broadcasting houses, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2018-2019, there is a new policy that intends to have all ICT procurement in the ministries and the state corporations centralized under the Ministry of ICT, Communication and Information in order to ensure economics of scale and optimize upon the shared services strategy. Honorable Speaker, over the years, each of the ministries and MDAs have been buying licenses for their own systems, security licenses for Kaspersky and other security systems, Honorable Speaker, but with this policy of centralizing all the ICT services through the Ministry of ICT, the ministry is going to save a lot of resources because of economic of scale. Honorable Speaker, when you buy all this as bulk, the cost of buying licenses is going to come down by close to about 40%, which will enable the ministry to take these savings and implement projects that will assist in implementation of the Big Four. Honorable Speaker, the Committee on Information Communication and Innovation is in charge of the Ministry of ICT. In the financial year 2018-2019, the Ministry of ICT has been allocated a total of 31,900,009,000. This is composed of 4.8 billion meant for recurrent expenditure and 27.04 billion meant for development expenditure. However, this is below the resource requirement of the ministry. The ministry had, in the budget policy statement, had been allocated 58 billion, but there is a shortfall of 27 billion. Honorable Speaker, this will negatively impact implementation of the projects by this particular ministry. So we will be seeking in the future, especially on during the next financial year, to increase the allocations so that the ministry may achieve its objective. Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the relationship, I want to talk about the relationship between the ICT sector to the Big Four agenda. In boosting of the manufacturing sector, the government intends to invest in key areas such as ICT. A comprehensive ICT and relevant infrastructure will enhance the easiness of doing business. For instance, the process of acquiring licenses and work permits will be made faster. What the ministry intends to do, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure the e-citizen portal and the Huduma centers are fully automated so that our people don't have to move from far to come to these particular centers. Another key issue that the ministry intends to do, Honorable Speaker, is what we call constituency innovation hubs. In this particular financial year, Honorable Speaker, later on we'll be seeking for additional funds so that at least each of our constituencies will have 4 innovation centers, and this will help in creation of about 500,000 jobs for our youth, because we intend the youth to look for employment online. They can do research online from their own wards, from their own constituencies, instead of going to big towns to look for internet access. So internet access will be available in each of the wards in our constituency, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Chairman, Budget and Appropriation Committee, for allowing us to get additional resources to complete the Konza project, the Konza complex, because, Honorable Speaker, there are many investors who have shown interest to come to Kenya and invest in the Konza Technopolis. There are those who have shown interest to set up hospitals. There are those who have shown interest to set up university. There is one particular Korean university that have already agreed that in the course of this year, by October, they are going to move in to Konza to set up a Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology that will specialize with postgraduate degrees in science and medicine, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support and thank my committee members and also the Budget and Appropriation Committee for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for being within time. Now, the next one is the Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations has sought the chair's indulgence, and is the only committee that has done that. And so we shall revisit that. The next one is the Committee on Education and Research. The chair. It can't be that easy that next time, I mean, they should be here. I think the communication was very express from the Speaker that they need to be present. So on that one, we are not as gracious to extend the indulgence. But anyway, shall we have energy? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for giving us this opportunity. Honourable Speaker, I first want to thank the members of the Energy Committee for their tireless effort to be able to scrutinize the budgets. As indicated in our Constitution, Parliament plays a very big role. Honourable Speaker, in these, the BPS is brought before the House, and we engage as committees. We engage the Budget and Appropriation Committee, and the Parliament does speak and approves, only for Treasury again to slash the budgets after the Budget and Appropriation Committee and Parliament. So maybe I'll be seeking some communication from the Chair so that we can be able to get a directive in future on how we are supposed to progress. Mr. Speaker, following the referral of estimates to the Department Committee, the Committee on Energy held its meeting in Mombasa to scrutinize budget estimates for the financial year 2018-2019 for the ministries, state departments and agencies under the purview after briefing by the Parliamentary Budget Office. Mr. Honourable Speaker, after deliberation, the committee made the following observation on budgets estimates for the financial year 2018-2019 for the State Department of Energy and State Department of Petroleum. I'll start with the State Department of Energy. Mr. Speaker, the State Department has been allocated 62 billion in the financial year 2018-2017, which signals a 19% reduction in the budget compared to the current financial year, that is 2017-2018, which stands at 77 billion shillings. Honourable Speaker, this is a significant drop, and it has dropped for the last since 2013-2014, where we had 111 billion, and over the years it has continued reducing to the current 62 billion shillings. The committee also noted this allocation is below the approved BPS ceilings of the 73.15 billion. And this is where, Honourable Chair, Speaker, was saying, is that we sit here and approve a very important statement in the name of the budget policy statement, only for us to get different figures during the actual estimates. Mr. Speaker, the power transmission and distribution programs is prioritized in the financial year 2018-2019, and an allocation of 47 out of the 62, which represents 76% of the gross allocation to the State Department for Energy. Mr. Speaker, at least 57% of the total development budget in the State Department is funded by our development partners, which is a very critical component where out of what we have, 57% of the total budget, we get our monies from our development partners, a very critical component in our development. This scenario has the potential of compromising the absorption rates wherever the government of Kenya counterpart funding is not provided. Honourable Speaker, I think it is also very important for us to note that much as we get so much from the donor funding, then the government must play its part to be able to give the counter funding. And whenever they don't give that, then it means that the development funding will never be released. And this has really affected some of the projects, Honourable Chair, Honourable Speaker, that I'm going to be mentioning much later. To remedy this, the committee is urging the government of Kenya to ensure it prioritizes provision of counterpart funding. Mr. Speaker, the State Department on Energy reported an accumulated pending bills totaling to 22 billion shillings, with Kenya Power and Lighting Company taking the lion's share of 13 billion shillings. The Kenya National Electricity Transmission Company, KETRACO, at 3.9 billion, Geothermal, GDC at 4.9 billion, and the Kenya Nuclear Electricity Board at 148 million shillings. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think this is another issue that we really need to raise in this House, Mr. Speaker, sir, because the pending bills, there is no purpose of us starting some new projects when we have such huge pending bills which are never funded and money is never given for the respective ministry to be able to clear its pending bills. Mr. Speaker, pending bills hinder implementation of any subsequent financial year, in this case 2018-2019 budget, since they form first charge on the budget. Provisions for funding to clear the pending bills and completion of ongoing projects should be prioritized. Honorable Speaker, and this is what I'm saying again, we have 13 projects ongoing which are on average at almost 75% complete. And not even a single shilling was given in the year 2018-2019. And of course, Honorable Speaker, you will understand that this does bring a lot of holding charges and idle time, because the contractors are already on site and they are charging us the holding charges and the idle. So I think it is important for Treasury to be considering on matters on how to settle the pending bills. Mr. Speaker, the critical projects like last mile connectivity, connectivity subsidies, street lighting, and connection of public facilities are grossly underfunded. These projects are key to enhancing a level of power connectivity to the common mwananchi. Honorable Speaker, again I want to reiterate and thank the Committee on Budget that after our presentation we were able to be given some extra funding to cater for the last mile connectivity, the transformer connectivity, and the street lighting, which brings a 24-hour economy. Honorable Chair, I also want to say that the committee observed that the delay by the national government in putting funds in improving transmission grid lines has aided in the following negative effects. One, the high cost of power due to the use of expensive Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited power, which is imported from our neighbors, and the use of Mohoroni diesel generators in the Western Kenya. And this is where out of the 13 transmission lines which have not been funded, and there are almost project delays. Honorable Chair, we are paying as a country such huge charges, holding charges, just because we are unable to complete the transmission lines. Mr. Speaker, the committee also observed that there are 13 projects which are ongoing, in which we required 13.4 billion for wayleave costs. However, only a parity of 1.7 had been allocated in 2017-2018. But I want to thank the committee, the Budget and Appropriation Committee, for having reinstated almost 4 billion shillings for that purpose. The State Department of Petroleum, Honorable Chair, Mr. Speaker, the Department on Petroleum has been allocated 3.5 billion for the financial year 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, despite the government push to reduce dependence on kerosene, Honorable Speaker, this is another line where, again, kerosene, adulteration of fuel, just because the difference of kerosene and diesel is so huge. And we are thinking as a committee on how this government, we are going to increase, of course, the cost of kerosene to be able to address. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is quickly losing its reputation as a preferred transport corridor for fuel on transit, owing to the unnecessary delay in our roads. And Honorable Chair, again, we'll be asking the Interior and Transport to reduce the number of roadblocks to be able to free the movement of trucks that...
Very well, Mr. Chairman, well said. Mr. Chairman, you know, I will not add you more, because if I add you, your neighbor will need more time. So Mr. Chairman, point made, I can tell, point made. Now, the Chair of Education, when I was calling him, he just appeared at the door. Mr. Chairman, next time I will not be as gracious as I am now. You have the floor, Chair, Education and Research. Mr. Chairman, for Environment and Natural Resources, certainly will be next. So you are just 10 minutes away. Chair, Education and
my Committee of Education for the work that we did. Mr. Speaker, the 2018-2019 proposed budget for education has 5 spending agencies. Mr. Speaker, the education budget is 439.1 billion shillings. This is the second highest sector in terms of resource allocation in the budget. Mr. Speaker, let me point out that the importance the government has placed in this sector. Mr. Speaker, you need to know that this is a sector that assists in enabling the big 5. The various state agencies and their allocation is as follows. State Department for Early Learning and Basic Education, Mr. Speaker, is 96.6 billion. State Department for Vocational and Technical Training, 10.3 billion. State Department for Research and University Education, 100 billion. State Department for Post-Training and Skills Development, 1.9 billion. This is a very new department, Mr. Speaker. Teacher Service Commission, which is the largest of these, 227 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, the various areas of spending which has been given priority in the 2018-2019 budget includes resource to support free primary and secondary education. Mr. Speaker, you need to know that one of the flagship projects of this government is to ensure that we have free access to both primary and secondary schools, 100% transition. And in the last year, a number of schools were built through the infrastructure improvement funds. There is also a lot of money indicated or actually allocated to funding of the university education, management of teacher resources, research, as well as expansion and improvement of TVET institutions. Mr. Speaker, I want you to note that as part of our role in oversighting the ministry on budget matters, allow me to point out some of the key issues of concern which the committee observed. That one, to achieve the 100% transition in secondary schools, we noted that we need enough teachers. And in the last budget, on this budget, we have not been allocated enough money to recruit the teachers. So in fact, in this budget, Mr. Speaker, we have an underfunding of 10 billion shillings, because over and above what we got in this financial year, we still need over 20,000 teachers. Honorable Speaker, the committee noted that the school feeding program is actually going on well. However, we have a number of communities who are moving across, especially in the ASAL areas. We need the ministry to even do more by trying to make sure that they meet these communities and they are able to follow them so that these children can go to school. It has been noted, even in areas in West Pokot, where student population in schools increase when food is given to students in those particular schools. So we really need to put a lot of emphasis on this. Mr. Speaker, the committee also under the ministry has begun capturing learners' details at the various levels of education through education management information system, which is a commendable job. The education management information system has enabled the government to really weed out ghost students. Now money can be given to schools based on students having their own numbers and their own names, not based on population and data given by the teachers. These are very commendable kind of work that has been happening. On TVET, Mr. Speaker, the expansion of TVET infrastructure has actually been going on. But I want to note and commend honorable members in this House, because this is a program that has been running in all the constituencies with the support of members of parliament. A number of members of parliament has given out 10 million shillings as seed capital. They also provided land, they also provided electricity, they also provided water. But in this case, Mr. Speaker, in the last parliament, there was spending which was cut, but this has been reinstated so that now we'll have the 60 which are already complete and the 70 now which are been given money, they will all be complete. But The money that we requested and we really added this particular sector is to recruit enough teachers, what we call the trainers, so that those particular institutions are operational. Mr. Speaker, the expansion of TVET infrastructure, the committee observed that the first phase, that is constructing 60 TTIs, has been completed, and the second phase is on course. However, there are a few TTIs under phase 1, which are not 100% complete due to challenges between the ministry and the NGCDF. Certain constituencies have not given out their 10 million, or they have not given out, they have not connected electricity to those areas. So I want to urge this House and members to do their part. The ministry and the NGCDF management need to coordinate to ensure that these projects are fully completed and are operational. Mr. Speaker, a conditional grant of 2 billion was allocated to counties to support the village polytechnics, which this House approved under the Division of Revenue Act. Honorable Speaker, this is the second financial year the grant is being allocated and no impact has been felt on the ground in terms of rehabilitating the village polytechnics. This is actually under the Division of Revenue, and this House needs to note what is the impact of that, even in the next appropriation bill. Mr. Speaker, going forward, this House needs to really evaluate whether we need to continue allocating these resources to county government. As a committee, we will embark on fact-finding mission on selected counties to see how this allocation has been utilized and report back to the House. Mr. Speaker, on university education, the committee observed most of the public universities are not well funded and are struggling to stay afloat or operational. A problem compounded by the criteria used to allocate resources. However, the committee had to make very hard budget decisions to assist some of these affected universities. In fact, Mr. Speaker, a number of universities actually have difficulty to operate. Some of them cannot attract students because of the constraints they have. A thorough review of the funding criteria for universities is required. And I think, Mr. Speaker, as we speak, we have what we call the differentiated unit cost. As a country, we need to have a serious conversation on whether we require the many public universities in view of the constrained resources. The committee also noted that some institutions such as Commission for University Education and the National Council for Science and Technology, NACOSTI, are involved in income-generating activities. However, some of their revenues have not been indicated in A. So, Mr. Speaker, the committee went ahead to reduce spending, especially in some of these agencies where they have not indicated how much they have collected their A and they have not declared that, because that is part of the budget-making process. Mr. Speaker, we also made a decision to reduce the budget for these two entities, especially the Commission for University Education and NACOSTI. Mr. Speaker, the committee, having reviewed the budget for education sector, made policy and financial recommendation that the ministry will pick up. We are aware of what even happened at the Nairobi school. That is why we are telling the sector leaders to ensure that they move around and provide the required resources.
Chairman, Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the financial year 2018-2019 budget estimate was submitted and tabled to the National Assembly pursuant to Article 221 of the Constitution and Section 3137 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Mr. Speaker, in line of the provision of Standing Order number 235, the committee scrutinized the budget estimate for the ministries, department and agencies under its mandate. Mr. Speaker, for the financial year 2018-2019, allocations for the MDAs under the purview of the Committee of Environment and Natural Resources.
Honorable Chair, what is it? What's the point of order, Honorable Wanyonyi, member for Kwanza?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's only fair that although of course we have allocated 10 minutes to various chairmen of various committees, I think this House must be informed in fully. And I think at your discretion, Mr. Speaker, all those, it's very important, Mr. Speaker, that we give them more time. Thank you.
Very, very well, member for Kwanza. Your point is very valid, but this House yesterday did make a decision that every chairperson will get not more than 10 minutes. So the decision is made, Mr. Member for Kwanza, and that may not be revised at this time. But it will be good, actually, members to get an opportunity to maybe access the written presentation from the chairpersons. I'm sure the members will be keen. They may not be keen in all sectors, but there are members who are keen on certain sectors. It will be good for them to access the written presentation from the chair so that they can read and get through. And some of it which will inform their presentation when we open up to the members. So member for Kwanza, the House did make a decision that it is 10 minutes maximum. And the chair is unable to revise that at this time. Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the following are the allocations for the MDH under the purview of the Committee of Environment and Natural Resource. The Minister of Water and Sanitation, it has been allocated a total of 41.6 billion Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee, having scrutinized and reviewed the above proposed allocation, observed that the sector which is critical enabler to the Big Four agenda is not adequately funded. Mr. Speaker, the water sector is funded every by donors and the concentration of water projects in towns and urban areas. The government therefore needs to enhance funding toward rural water projects which do not attract donor funding, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the National Water Harvesting Authority has a national mandate for bridging the gap between the demand and supply of water, which is in line with our Constitution and Vision 2030. This is therefore, there is need therefore, Mr. Speaker, to personalize the mandate of the authority as envisaged in the Water Act 2016, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, we are seeking to ensure that the National Water Harvesting Authority is properly reformed and its mandate is properly undertaken. Mr. Speaker, the Northern Water Service Board covers a larger area of the northeastern part of Rift Valley and Upper Eastern. Since it does not attract donor funding for its project, the committee recommends the initiation of the government-funded water harvesting project to improve access to safe water in the northern dry areas, which, Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank the Budget Committee for approving further funding of 200 million to these, to Northern Water Service Board to take care of the northern dry areas. Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, the committee observed that the country has a forest cover of about 7%, which is under threat of degradation. Our church, the Kenya Forest Service Protection Unit, is grossly underfunded as well as understaffed, with a ratio of 1 forest ranger covering 1,000 hectares of forest against the best practice of 1 forest ranger to 400 hectares. To protect the current forest cover effectively, the service would require an additional 1,500 forest rangers, which unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it has not been provided for. Mr. Speaker, the President, while launching the National Tree Planting Day 2018, emphasized that the country must meet a 10% tree cover by 2022. However, the current seed production is below the expected 360 million per year required to raise the tree cover by 10% by 2022. In order to achieve the President's target, additional financing is required. Mr. Speaker, you realize that the government came up with a task force, which means the recommendation that the country needs to achieve the 10% tree cover by 2022. But unfortunately, we are having 4 financial years, and this being the most critical financial year, which we need to have adequate funding, we have extremely very low funding to the tune of only 28 million Kenya shillings, against the expected almost 360 million Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, with the effect and the impact of the climate change, there is need to invest in better and modern weather forecasting and early warning system to prevent the Kenya Meteorological Department the capability to give accurate information on future erratic weather patterns, to ensure effective adaptation and mitigation measures, especially to avoid the damages caused by the flooding experienced in the country. Mr. Speaker, the State Department of Mining, with a budgetary allocation of 1.6 billion, out of which the development budget is only 549 million, is grossly underfunded. The department is currently contributing 0.9% of our GDP, which is expected to increase by 10% by 2030. The mining sector is also the highest potential revenue earner for the country, and the target revenue collection of 2.5 billion for the financial year 2018-2019 from royalties. Mr. Speaker, the committee noted that with enhanced funding, the State Department has the potential to achieve the 10% GDP target before the year 2030. Mr. Speaker, an allocation of 2.0 billion, which is a loan from the China Exim Bank to undertake the National Airborne Geographical Survey, was withdrawn from the State Department budget. Mr. Speaker, carrying out the activity is one of the flagship projects under the Vision 2030, and it is very crucial because it will help map up the potential minerals in the country. Mr. Speaker, as a committee, we are at a loss because this particular process of the Airborne Geographical Survey was started during the era of the Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala. And the government has gone ahead and secured more than 7 billion funding from the Exim Bank, but unfortunately the same is not being factored in the budget. Mr. Speaker, there is need to allocate 200 million for the purchase of land for medical and hazardous waste recycling facility. The government of Japan may withdraw the support of 1.2 billion to construct the facility once the government of Kenya acquire the land. Mr. Speaker, we realize that to be able to manage the hazardous medical waste, Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan government has secured 1.2 billion Kenya shillings. And all what the GOK is expected to do is to provide 200 million to be able to purchase the land. And the facilities will be able to put up by the Japanese government. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the same has not been provided. And that's what we are really asking the National Treasury to provide so that the country can be able to benefit from the grant by the Japanese government. Mr. Speaker, after reviewing and scrutinizing the budget, the committee reallocated funds from non-performing projects to more competing needs. Mr. Speaker, the report submitted to the Budget and Appropriation Committee has detailed information on additional requests and the reallocation by the committee. Mr. Speaker, a major reallocation done by the committee is the reduction of the 450 million from the Green School Program, which is an non-performing project, and allocating the funds to carry out water harvesting activities to improve access to safe water and rehabilitation and water supplies, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize the Green School Program was started during 2014-2015 financial year, and we are all aware there have been serious accountability issues raised with this particular program, and it was in the wisdom of the Environment Committee that the coming financial 2018-2019, the same is discontinued because even the permanent secretary could not really be able to explain how these funds were utilized. So, Mr. Speaker, you expect the 450 billion to be reallocated to other deserving sector, and especially the water sector, Mr. Speaker. And I hope the same will have been captured by the Budget Committee. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Meteorological Department, under the Minister of Environment and Forestry, are spending bills of more than 427.8 billion, most of which were as a result of the budget cut. Mr. Speaker, another major pending bill is of 500 million by Maoa Water and Drainage Project under the Minister of Water and Sanitation. Mr. Speaker, the project is complete. However, the pending bills need to be settled to enable the contractor to hand over the project. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Water and Sanitation have really been doing a very commendable job in providing water in urban areas. But Mr. Speaker, the issue of the last mile water connectivity in the rural areas surrounding the urban centers, Mr. Speaker, it has not been successful. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are calling upon further funding to the sector to ensure that the last mile water connectivity becomes successful. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, we have several dams which have stored in the country, including Uma Dam. We have the Basha Dam in Marsabit County, among others, which which are not been provided for under the particular budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I really want to take this opportunity to thank the Budget and Appropriation Committee under the able leadership of Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah and the entire committee for the good work which they are doing and capturing the recommendations of various committees when they are coming up with the final Budget and Appropriation Committee. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Very well. Before I give to the next chair, allow me to recognize some schools that have visited, both at Public Gallery and Speakers Gallery. We have WAC. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Member for Rarienda. Yes, WAC Girls Boarding from Rarienda, Siaya County. Kaidawood Academy from Rangata constituency, Nairobi County. Kanga High School, Rongo constituency, Migori County. And Greenyard Junior, Kajiado North constituency, Kajiado County. They are welcome to follow the proceedings of Parliament this morning and afternoon. Now, the finance and planning, national planning, have sought the indulgence of a chair, so we will come back to them shortly. We have now health. Chair for health, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to take this opportunity also to welcome the students who are here today, because these are our future leaders. Mr. Speaker, the Departmental Committee on Health, as part of the scrutiny of 2018-2019 budget estimates for the Ministry of Health, we held lengthy deliberations with the ministry officials and afterwards made a number of recommendations both on policy and on budget reallocations. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health has a budget of 90 billion in the year of 2018-2019, which is an enhanced allocation compared to this current financial year, which was at 78 billion. Most of these allocations are conditional grants to the county governments, as you are all aware that health is devolved, as well as allocations to various parastatals in the sector such as Kenyatta National Hospital, Kemri, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, KEMSA, amongst others. Mr. Speaker, with this budget allocation, the ministry will be implementing the 4 key programs with the following allocations in addition to administration costs. On preventive and promotion healthcare at around 9.9 billion, National Referral and Special Aid Services at 40 billion, Health Research and Development at 6.8 billion, General Administration and Planning at 9.1 billion, Health Policy and Standards and Regulations at 23.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the key projects that the ministry will implement include the continuing programs of leasing of medical equipment, which is famously known as MES, purchase of CT scans, allocation of conditional grants to level 5 hospitals, establishments of cancer centers, where the intention is to have in place by end of this financial year 4 cancer centers, and an improvement with the years to follow. Free maternity strategic interventions, vaccines and immunizations, and several donor-funded interventions aimed at supporting the universal health care agenda, amongst others. Mr. Speaker, as a committee, we deliberated, and some of my committee observations on the budget in which decisions have been made are as follows. 1, Mr. Speaker, some of the key budgetary allocations in the Ministry of Health are conditional grants to the county governments. Mr. Speaker, most of these conditional grants relating to health functions going to the county governments take time to reach the intended health facilities, since the funds must first pass through the county revenue fund before reaching the health facilities, hence hampering service delivery. And that means, Mr. Speaker, if money for health is sent to the county, and this money is not ring-fenced, that means then the county can choose to use that money in other functions like roads or other popular functions, think would be better than health. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of concern to us as a committee, and thus this House needs to think of a way in which the relevant public finance laws can be amended to allow conditional allocations to be dispersed directly to the health facilities for fast service delivery, while at the same time putting in place accountability systems to ensure that these allocations are well spent as intended. Mr. Speaker, there are also very huge historical investments in the health sector, which are aimed at supporting the overall goal of universal health care. Some of these investments include the leasing of medical equipment and purchase of CT scans. As a committee, Mr. Speaker, we will follow up and monitor the implementation of these investments to ensure that the benefits are felt in the country. We had interaction with the Budget Committee where they did public participation. Some of these equipments are functioning very well, apart from around 6 or 7 facilities that some of these equipments have not actually been used at all. My committee will carry out inspections on these projects, and the committee will take drastic budgetary measures if what is on the ground in terms of implementation does not reflect the huge budget allocation to the project. Point to note is that there are also proposed additional 21 facilities in addition to the 98 that were covered in the last financial year. Mr. Speaker, my committee also observed that the ministry has entered into an exchange program with the Cuba government on the area of medicine. The program is elaborate where, apart from just what we know in the public that the doctors are coming from Cuba, and I think some of them landed in last night, Kenyan doctors will also be trained in Cuba. And there's also an enhanced program on control of malaria in this country, and also training that will also benefit our students who are at the KMTC. Mr. Speaker, in spite of potential benefits of skills transfer, the ministry should also consider hiring some of the specialists who are local doctors to augment this effort. Mr. Speaker, my committee is also concerned on the program named Slum Upgrading Project that has not been well implemented, and the portable clinics are lying unutilized, partly because of lack of support from some of the identified counties meant for benefit from this project, and also some of issues that were raised by the previous committee. Mr. Speaker, upon the visit by my committee to Mombasa, where the containers are, and they're also in good shape, we noted that there are several other counties which have expressed interest to uptake this project, and that the allocation of these clinics need to be demand-driven, where counties willing or who have expressed interest are allocated the portable clinics at their cost. We have also noted that the Ministry of Gender had an interest in these containers where they can use them as gender-based violence clinics, where they can take care of the victims of gender-based. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have advised the ministry to liaise with the willing counties who want to take up, and also the Ministry of Gender, instead of those clinics, and they are very good, just lying in Mombasa unutilized. Mr. Speaker, my committee noted that the slum upgrading project is part of an active EACC investigation, hence the budgetary allocation to it was not visible, and that's why we advised the ministry to take up. In the view of this, Mr. Speaker, my committee recommended a reallocation of the budget for this project will be able to achieve the UHC program. Mr. Speaker, the committee noted that the ministry has put efforts, especially towards the support of universal health care as part of the Big Four agenda, and launched pilot programs in 4 counties. The outcome of this pilot will guide future rollouts in other parts of the country. But we also, Mr. Speaker, that as we roll out this pilot program for UHC, issuance of the NHIF card reward the counties that have seen to really support the health care. Mr. Speaker, the committee had the ministry, as at 31st March 2018, had a pending bill of 121,871,425 shillings. All this was a result of lack of exchequer releases. Even through the ministry, we'll treat the pending bills as fast charged in the subsequent financial year. This will have an effect of distorting the budget, as finances will be channeled away from the programs to settle the bills. I also urge honorable members of this House, we have huge pending bills owed to KEMSA by various counties. Mr. Speaker, it is sad that some of the governors have actually...
Order, Honorable Chair. What is it, Honorable Oda Odhiambo? You were raising a point of order? What's it?
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member is a bit too fast. Can she go a bit slowly, that you can hear what she's saying? She's too fast for us, Mr. Speaker.
What do you mean, Honorable Oda?
She's reading too fast. Yeah, she's reading too fast.
Well, all the other members look pretty comfortable with that speed, clearly. So, Honorable Chair. You got the response from another member that is how girls who have gone to school read. No, I suspect that was on a light note, Honorable Member. Honorable Udo, don't take that seriously. I think it was on a nice note. Honorable Chair, Please proceed, but take keen interest on what Honorable Udo is saying. But we will recoup your 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, you know, the honorable member need to adopt that now he's in the National Assembly. He was used to the environment of the county assembly, and so the speed might be a little bit higher, but I know he will adjust with time. Mr. Speaker, and that is again honorable member note. Mr. Speaker, I was saying the members of this house need to take note that a lot of our counties owe KEMSA a lot of money. And so they have also, some of them have actually opted to run away from procuring from KEMSA and going to the local chemists. Mr. Speaker, I will urge members to follow up their counties and urge them, especially their governors, to pay up what they owe to KEMSA, because this is not only, they don't not only give cheaper, you know, amount of the medicine they purchase cheaper instead of running away to the village chemist, Mr. Speaker. And so this money, if it's paid, KEMSA will be able to facilitate and make sure that the country has enough medication. As a committee, we will diligently play our oversight role, especially on the implementation of ministry key projects, to ensure that the taxpayers get much needed quality health services, and also to ensure that there's value for money. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Budget Committee. They really engaged us. And I think for the first time in the history of this House, we have a budget that members can be able to scrutinize, go through and see what they are benefiting from the county level to the constituency level, almost to the ward level. And I want to really commend the Budget Committee for a job well done. I support the Budget Committee report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next is Chair, Justice and Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the legislature has great strides in the oversight of the budget since the establishment of the new constitution. And Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 235 of the National Assembly Standing Orders provide that the estimate upon being laid in the House are deemed to be committed to the various committees. And Mr. Speaker, my committee, in accordance with Schedule 2 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, my committee, Mr. Speaker, and anti-corruption and human rights. In line with this mandate, Mr. Speaker, the committee met the agencies to discuss the budget. Mr. Speaker, this sector plays a vital role in the creation of an enabling and stable business environment that will attract investment from both local and international investors for job creation and investment by ensuring that there is democracy, respect for rule of law, and cohesion in the nation. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a very important sector. The sector aims to ensure effective and accountable leadership, promote a just, democratic, and secure environment with strong governance structure to achieve inclusive economic, social, and political development. So, Mr. Speaker, during the engagements with the agencies under the committee, Mr. Speaker, we made the following observations. One, the committee has also observed that there is an allocation of 1 billion to the Attorney General's Office for the National Justice for Restoration Fund to implement the recommendations of the TJRC report. However, Mr. Speaker, the challenge we have with this allocation is that there is no legal framework and regulations on how these funds should be utilized. That is one observation, Mr. Speaker, which is critical. 1 billion, yes, available, but we don't have a legal framework to implement and to apply that amount. The committee, Mr. Speaker, also observed that there are ongoing suits against the government with financial risk to the tune of 769.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, these are ongoing cases against the government. In addition, Mr. Speaker, there are awards against the government pending payments to the tune of 115.7 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, the total of this is that we are exposed as a country to a tune of 886 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, these huge pending bills in terms of the court awards is as a result of state agencies not prompting settlement of claims, but abandoning the same with the Attorney General's office. So, Mr. Speaker, the Committee further observes that the judiciary was in the process of constructing various courts so as to extend functional courts to all the 47 counties. Mr. Speaker, we have a total of 72 courts now being constructed across the country. Fifth, Mr. Speaker, is that under Section 24 of the Political Parties Act, the government is required to allocate 3%, which is actually 2.7 billion Kenya shillings of the national government revenue of 2017-18. Mr. Speaker, the Budget Committee allocated only 3 recommendations by the committee. We have policy recommendations, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of policy, the government should consider setting up a fund because, Mr. Speaker, we need to deal with this issue of 886 billion Kenya shillings. How is government going to deal with that particular bill, which is already outstanding? We should be able to come forward, Mr. Speaker, with procedure and see how we can deal with that, with that huge burden. And you are proposing that the government should be able to set a fund to sort out this bill and come with other measures, Mr. Speaker, which can enable the government raise money to pay those outstanding bills. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the committee further recommended that in setting up the fund, the Budget and Appropriation Committee should consider effecting budgetary cuts against the state agencies that lost those cases and have claims to settle in order to raise funds for the kitty subject to their contributions to the awards against the government. Mr. Speaker, this will give discipline to institutions, to government departments, so that they are able to ensure that when they are executing their functions, they don't become careless and end up exposing government. Mr. Speaker, financial recommendation also, the Attorney General's office, allocation of 1.1 billion for the National Justice Restoration Fund be reduced by 500 million, and this, Mr. Speaker, is proposed to be spread across the needs of the other sectors, agencies under this sector, Mr. Speaker. The Judicial Service Commission allocation of 100 million will be reduced by 100 million. The committee's decision is informed by the lack of adequate justification by the Commission for the significant increase in its budget for 2018-19. Mr. Speaker, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, in its wisdom, Mr. Speaker, reduced the budget for judiciary by 2.5 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, this is amounts that 1.6 million is donor funds being funded by the World Bank, and the balance is the GOK, or the Government of Kenya, contribution. Mr. Speaker, this has an effect of delaying the completion of the courts to be constructed. And Mr. Speaker, this is an area where we hope that perhaps in the supplementary to come, at the course of this year, Mr. Speaker, we need to make provision so that we are able to avail funds to conclude the construction of the courts. Mr. Speaker, we had a number of proposed increments for the Law Reform Commission. We requested for 34 million Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, the committee allocated only 10 million, leaving a balance of 24 million. We also requested funding for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission for 75 million Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker, and the committee also did not approve that. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have several agencies under our sector which don't have enough funding for their functions in this coming financial year. And Mr. Speaker, the last one I wanted to comment on is the issue of additional allocation of 30 million Kenya shillings to the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, budget of 2018-19, for the acquisition of field vehicles and 27 million, and the setting of pending bills of 3.6 million. The committee, Mr. Speaker, gave the 3.6 million and did not allocate the other figure of 27. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, let me say that I want to appreciate this was a very, very well discussed budget. We appeared before the committee, Mr. Speaker, shared the needs of our sector. They were able to take into account some of the areas where they have not been able to avail funds, Mr. Speaker. We want to say that it is still a big requirement, especially, Mr. Speaker, in the sector of justice, where, Mr. Speaker, we need really to create the enabling environment.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next one is Chair for Labor and Social Welfare. Where is the chair? Labor.
Consideration to enhance its responsiveness, efficiency, and effectiveness in addressing emerging issues facing the labor sector. The State Department has not been financed to all tripartite statutory meetings, which will assist in alleviating industries' unrest, as well as signing bilateral labor agreements with key labor destinations to ensure protection of fundamental rights of Kenyan workers in those countries. Mr. Speaker, under the Youth Empowerment Program, the committee, after further scrutiny and deliberation, cut the NYS budget and reallocate the funds to more competing needs within the sector. The committee also raised concern on the NYS engagement in commercialization, especially in regards to the purchase of the commuter passes, and commended holding the process. Honorable Speaker, the mandate of the NEX is to monitor, facilitate, and advise the integration of the principles of equality and freedom from the discrimination in all national county policies, laws, and administrative regulations in other public and private institutions. The Commission has therefore not been able to audit the government institution and compliance with the constitutional requirements on the gender due to lack of funds. Mr. Speaker, the Department for the Development of the Asals has not been financed adequately to carry out activities towards enhancing the community resilience against drought among communities in the Asal counties. Mr. Speaker, the State Department needs enhanced resources to enable the communities move to the relief of the resilience, Honorable Speaker, the committee, having scrutinized and reviewed the 2018-2019 budget estimate for the labor.
With the chair lady here, and Honorable Speaker, we did reduce the NYS budget like she has stated. I don't want to repeat, but I want to inform the House that...
What is your point of order, Honorable?
I want to inform the House that the order is that... my point of order is that there are forces from above within the government system trying to enforce on the budget committee and ourselves to retain that budget where it is, and I'll be looking forward to the House.
Order, member. Member, what you're doing is actually to contribute, and you shall get a chance.
Thank you.
What we are doing, if I just remind you, we are giving the chairs an opportunity. After they are done, we will give now to other members to present, and you will get a chance to speak to the budget as well.
Thank you, Chair, but I'm a whistleblower. Take care.
You get a chance to do your contribution, certainly, honorable member. Yes, the next is Chair Lance.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourables, very well. So I would like to commend the Chair for the good work.
Honorable Speaker, the Departmental Committee on Lands is constituted to oversight two agencies, that is the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning and the National Land Commission, NLC. The committee held consultative meetings with the ministry and also with the NLC in order to understand their projects and programs. The meetings were preceded by a briefing by the Parliamentary Budget Office on the budget 2018-2019, and I would like to thank the Budget Office for that. Honorable Speaker, the budget expenditure for the Lands Policy and Planning Program, Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning, for this year is 6.020 billion, comprising of 2.6 billion for recurrent expenditure and 3.3 billion for capital expenditure. Ministry of Lands plans to implement only one budget program, and this is Land Policy and Planning. The objective of the ministry and of the program is to ensure efficient and sufficient and efficient administration of and sustainable management of land resource. Honorable Speaker, it is also the purpose of the ministry to ensure that there is development and planning that is done adequately to ensure reforms, land information, management systems, land use, and land settlements that these programs are implemented. The ministry's requirement for development in financial year 2018-2019 was 2.6 billion. Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that the ministry has received 6 billion. Honorable Speaker, I would like the Parliamentary Committee on Lands to be on record because the Ministry of Lands is underfunded, looking at the programs that they would like to implement and bearing in mind that it is a revenue generating ministry which is generating about 10 billion to Treasury. So we are also speaking on their behalf that if it is possible, their budget to be increased, because if they are able to give 10 billion and they are not able to meet all the programs that they're implementing, and for them to be encouraged to collect more, then it is good for their budgets also to be increased. That is just a comment. Honorable Speaker, this ministry is interested in renovation of land registries. It is critical in supporting the digitization process, where survey and maintenance of national land and also our international boundaries to ensure peaceful coexistence within the local communities and also within our borders. In addition, Honorable Speaker, funds are highly required for land control boards. And Honorable Speaker, I would like to note that they had been awarded 45 million, and this has been reduced in the wisdom of and also with deliberations, it was reduced to 12 million, Honorable Speaker, for 47 counties, for the land control boards to be able to operate with 12 million Kenya shillings. It's extremely low. The committee had recommended 95 million, but this was not possible. We are taking note of it together with the budget committee so that this can be implemented next. The ministry's medium-term expenditure programs, projects and activities for implementation within 2018-2019 include processing and registration of 300,000 title deeds. Honorable Speaker, I would like to comment that in about 2 weeks ago, our government was able to give 50,000 title deeds to Nairobi, which is a big step, and now they're looking forward to producing 350,000 titles for the country. And this is the reason as well we are saying that it is important that more money is pumped into titling and registration of land. Speaker, also development of the land value index. Honorable Speaker, this afternoon we will be tabling the land value index bill, which is a very important bill. A lot of government money has been going to compensation. In some cases, almost to the level of implementation of the project itself, and we hope that ensuring that this National Land Value Index is implemented, it's going to reduce money that goes to compensation. Digitization of land registries, I've talked about it earlier. This is going to give investor confidence in our country, reduce timelines for registering property, and protecting investor and property owners from fraudulent land transactions which are happening in the country. Also, Honorable Speaker, construction of land registries. For the ministry to be able to digitize, then they need to construct and renovate. Honorable Speaker, this is also one of the budget lines that requires funding. Implementation of the National Spatial Plan, National Land Use Policy, so as to ensure optimal and sustainable use of land. Honorable Speaker, the matter of the settlement is a matter that touches on all of us as people's representatives. We have thousands and thousands of squatters in our country that have not been settled. And when you look at the money that has gone to resettlement is quite low compared to the number of squatters that need. We have thousands and thousands of squatters in various places. Rift Valley, Coast is most affected, Lamu, Kilifi, Taita Taveta, Mombasa, Trans Nzoia, and many other parts of the country where we have squatters. Infrastructure improvement, Honorable Speaker, of the Kenya Institute of Surveying and Mapping, capacity building and provision of technical support to counties in physical planning. We have realized that counties are not giving enough funding to capacity building and support to physical planning. If the counties do not plan, then even if the national government plans, it is impossible to get the kind of structures that are required. Honorable Speaker, when we go to National Land Commission, their requirement, what they have quoted now is 1.275 billion. Their requirement was 5 billion, and the committee is convinced that the programs that they are implementing are very important. They need to be funded. Honorable Speaker, I was just engaging, and I already engaged with the chair budget concerning Honorable Speaker, there are gaps in NLC. One is that they need money for historical land injustices, which is a matter that has been raised in many areas. They needed 250 in land throughout the country. Honorable Speaker, there is also a gap, a deficit in physical emoluments, which is very sensitive. There is also a gap in staff pensions. I know that the matter of pensions comes in almost all committees, but it is important that we raise it so that it goes on record. Honorable Speaker, the land sector is an enabler of the Big Four, and this is the reason as to why we are asking that it be facilitated more so that we can support the Big Four. It is going to facilitate acquisition of lands for housing, standard gauge railway, parks and other industrial parks, provision of the legal frameworks that are needed to cap the cost of leasing to attract private and foreign investors. It is also going to provide the legal framework to halt further subdivisions of land, which are not actually, some of them are not helping. And also, if land is funded as a support of the Big Four, it is going to unlock land for development through various measures, such as establishment of land bank.
Very well, Madam Chair, point made. Now we have Chair, Sports, Culture and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. From the onset, I want to thank the Chairman Budget Committee and the membership, also together with the members of Sports, Culture and Tourism Committee for the work during this budget cycle. The Committee on Sports, Culture and Tourism oversees 3 spending agencies, which include the Department of Sports, State Department of Heritage, and the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. Despite challenges in the delay in the disbursement of funds by the National Treasury, the agencies have recorded a very good performance, and this is attested by the high absorption rates and the reduced number of pending bills therein. Mr. Speaker, given the current goal of the government to implement the Big Four agenda, the committee is pleased to inform the House that tourism, culture, and sports are actually major enablers of this enormous agenda. and these activities generate income with which food security, universal health care, boosting the manufacturing sector, and affordable housing can be implemented. In the financial year 2017-2018, the sector experienced huge budget cuts of up to 75% in the supplementary estimates 1 and 2. This has adversely affected the service delivery in the agencies. Most projects stalled, and most 638.9 million, and 1,745.3 billion for recurrent and development expenditures, respectively. However, the budgetary provision for the recurrent and development expenditures currently stand at 1.5 billion and 525 million, respectively. This shortfall in the allocation is likely to occasion pending bills. As it is existing today, the Department of Sports actually has a pending bill of 1.1 and this has actually an adverse effect in the completion of these stadiums, which are very necessary for the sports in Kenya. For the State Department of Heritage, in the 5.4 million is required for development expenditure. This shortfall is also likely to occasion delay in the service delivery and timely implementation of projects in that department. The Minister of Tourism and Wildlife, recently this ministry was lumped together with tourism and wildlife sector. And in this ministry, the committee oversights one program known as Tourism Promotion and Development. The resource requirement for this program in the financial year 2018-19 was 13,747 million, of which 5,632 million is meant for recurrent expenditure, and 8,115 million is meant for development expenditure. However, only 5,288 million has been allocated to the program, where 2,668 million is meant for recurrent and 2,620 million is meant for development expenditure. Mr. Speaker, tourism being a very productive sector of the economy and a major foreign exchange earner and an enabler to the attainment of the government Big Four priority agenda and a contributor to the economy, there is need to reform the sector in order to realize the unexploited potential. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is our presentation, and we support the report. Thank you.
Very well. Chair, Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Yes, you have the floor, Honorable Kanin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, allow me on behalf of the committee to appreciate the invariable assistance of your office and that of the Clerk of the National Assembly in the scrutiny and consequently in the deliberations regarding the 2018-2019 estimates. Honorable Speaker, the Departmental Committee has the mandate to oversee the State Department of Industry, State Department for Cooperatives, and State Department for Small and Medium Enterprise, which we call trade. Support value addition and raise the manufacturing sector share of GDP to 15%, that will accelerate economic growth, creation of jobs, and reduce poverty. Honorable Speaker, arising from the mandate and upon the commitment of the estimates to the committee held several meetings for the scrutiny and the deliberations of 2018-2019 estimates for the 3 state departments. Honorable Speaker, the committee generally observed that the format of presentation of the estimates of the State Department differs as compared to the budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, just to pick on a few, the trade, for example, the State Department for Trade has been changed to the State Department for Small Medium Enterprise, among other issues. Honorable Speaker, on the gross proposed allocation to the State Departments, the State Department for Industry got the lion's share at 10.3 billion shillings. The State Department for Small and Medium Enterprise Trade got 2.7 billion, and the State Department for Cooperatives got 1.3 billion. Mr. Speaker, allow me to begin with the State Department for Cooperatives, which the committee did not realize any major issues in the estimates. Upon review of the submissions, the committee observed that despite the fact that SASLA, which is the regulating body, is projected to collect levies and more levies, they still had a huge deficit in the recurrent budget. Therefore, the committee recommended a reallocation of 30 million shillings from the allocation of new KCC development expenditure to SASLA recurrent expenditure. Since new KCC is commercially viable and can fill the deficit. Mr. Speaker, it was a very good engagement because it was a mutual agreement with the two entities, and they agreed that new KCC would seed 30 million shillings to give it to SASLA, and it is one of the major recommendations. Mr. Speaker, the committee faced challenges in deliberating and making recommendations on the proposed allocation to the other two state departments. The Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Speaker, in his submission, was not in agreement with the proposed allocation to the various entities and deliberately proposed new allocations as annexed in our report to the Budget and Appropriation Committee. Mr. Speaker, this I think was unusual because ordinarily Cabinet Secretaries would come to defend the budget that has been presented to us by Treasury. But unfortunately, in this case, the Cabinet Secretary created a complete deviation from what was presented to the floor of the House. So it called upon us as members of the committee to go to the ground to actually verify that what now the Cabinet Minister is proposing is in line with what he was saying. Mr. Speaker, and that is the reason we came up with a raft of changes to the budget. Mr. Speaker, as if that one was not enough, when we were doing the presentation to the Budget and Appropriation Committee, another letter came from Treasury, which was a communication from the Cabinet, saying that another 4.3 billion shillings had been laid or removed from the State Department to be taken to defense. So, Mr. Speaker, we were again, I think we were the only committee that was to appear before Budget and Appropriation Committee twice, because we had to go and reconsider the new recommendations that were coming from Treasury. Mr. Speaker, the letter proposed the reduction of the allocation to the various state agencies to zero. This included Kenya Industrial Estate, Kirdi, and Constituency Development Centers. Mr. Speaker, reducing an amount of 1 billion that was allocated to Kenya Industrial Estate to zero, we found it, Mr. Speaker, was not right. Kirdi, they have a huge building in South B, which has stalled for many years, Mr. Speaker, which is about 63% complete, reduced from 600 million shillings to zero. We have constituency industrial centers, which are spanned all over the country, from 700 million shillings to zero. Mr. Speaker, we sought to know why the Cabinet made that decision. But unfortunately, the minister was not in the country. We didn't get we didn't get any particular reason as to why there was that reduction. And more so, 4.3 billion shillings in one state department, which had gotten 10 billion shillings
it was reduced with 4.3 billion shillings. However, Mr. Speaker, following the recommendation, the communication, the committee convened a meeting to discuss the request by the National Treasury. And we agreed that the 2 billion shillings to be reduced from the State Department was okay, because that was meant for land, to purchase land in Naivasha for special economic zones. But we got information that maybe the government will get an alternative land, which we were okay with. But the reduction of the 2.3 billion was declined by the committee, taking into consideration the major role played by the State Department in achieving the Big Four. Mr. Speaker, industry is one of the Big Four, and there's a time that the government should also match the talk with the work. We need to put money where our talk is. A building that I think literally everybody knows about, which is next to K1 in Westlands. That building has been there for ages, over 12 years. It is 95% complete. Just need about 102 million shillings. But unfortunately, that building has stalled for so many years. The ministry is renting offices. They are spending almost 200 million shillings renting offices. But if that building is completed, we will for sure know that we will be saving the Kenya taxpayers' money. So, Mr. Speaker, further, the completion of Kibit will save the State Department over 200 million shillings that we are currently paying to Telcom. For this reason, the committee recommended to reallocate the 200 million shillings from the construction of constituency-centered projects to Kibit for the completion of the office block. However, Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier on, even the 200 million shillings that we were recommending to move from the constituencies has now been, the entire amount has been raided. Mr. Speaker, regarding the State Department for Industry, which has the largest mandate amongst the three departments, the committee was concerned that there was no linkage in terms of the budget proposal between the National Treasury and the State Department for Industry. And this led to major recommendations by our committee, which is given in the annexure. Mr. Speaker, the Big Four agenda envisages an increase in revenue from textile industry from USD 350 million shillings to USD 2 billion shillings, create 500,000 cotton jobs and 100,000 new apparel jobs by the year 2022. Requires increased production of cotton. This calls for technical service on cotton production and value addition. In this regard, the committee recommended for the increase in allocation towards contracted technical service on cotton production by 200 million shillings. Mr. Speaker.
Order. What is it again? Honorable Uda Odhiambo.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I just wanted to know that Kanini Kega is so passionate about the report. At least his reading is not casual, like what I've seen before. So Kanini Kega, congratulations from me. That was my intervention.
Honorable Odhiambo. Order, Honorable Odhiambo. Well, let me not say more than that, but Honorable Kanini, we shall recoup you a few seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, to improve the Kenya global ranking on doing business, the business indicators from our current position of 92 to within the top 50 and further lower the cost of doing business for both domestic and foreign investors, we require re-engineering and remodeling of business environment indicators. For this reason, the committee recommended for the increase in allocation towards the ease of doing business by 400 million shillings. Honorable Speaker, is no doubt that the numerical machine complex, commonly you remember with the Nyayo car, there is a lot that is happening in that industry, but unfortunately it has not been funded. Mr. Speaker, for the interest of time, we recommended that an increase of 150 million shillings. Mr. Speaker, there is need to meet for specific need of investors in the textile industry, and therefore the importance of development of textile hub that is projected to attract at least 100 textile investors farm and projected to create over 200,000 jobs. We recommend.
Very well, Honorable Kanini Kega. Of course, the passion and for this, what you are saying, has been registered by Honorable Udo. That has been registered, but nevertheless, I'm afraid your slot is gone. Honorable Kanini, if you sought 1 more minute, I will be obligated to add 1 more minute to the next chair, and we will not finish. What is it? Yes, yes. You use your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, Mr. Speaker, if you have a member who is as passionate and even has been promoted by Honorable Order, Mr. Speaker, can you have it in your heart to add him 2 minutes? Because it's not every day you find members that are so passionate about the work that...
Honorable Kanini, now that you have stood, 10 seconds to finish. Now that.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we recommended 420 million shillings to be given to Athi River Textile Hub. Mr. Speaker, the committee is cognizant of the importance of the Kenya Industrial Estate, the Kenya Leather Development Council, and the Kenya Okiriti in the promotion of industrial growth and overall national development. However, the committee is concerned that the proposal may not also be absorbed, especially for KIE, who are given 1 billion.
Well, Honorable Kanini, you can't be sought. Now, the people on my left are very happy, and they clearly are not seeking more time for you. Chair, Transport, Public Works, and Housing.
I thank you, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I also want to join the other honorable members to thank my colleague for being very passionate on this. Chair, so that I spend my 10 minutes properly, I thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I want to present the Transport Committee report. Chair, in this department, we oversight 4 state departments. And this is as follows, Speaker. State Department of Infrastructure has received 180 billion. And for purpose of understanding or simple understanding, Speaker, State Department of Infrastructure is roads, basically. That is what you want to say, Speaker. Number 2, we have also State Department of Transport. And in this one, it has received or is going to receive, if these honorable members approve, they are going to receive 100 billion, Speaker. And this money is distributed amongst big projects that I'm going to mention, Speaker, that for the rail transport is going to receive 74 billion, Honorable Speaker. And this is from Nairobi to Naivasha, and that is basically normally known as SGR. Speaker, in the same Department of Transport, we have a marine transport, Speaker, which has been allocated 12 billion. Basically, this money, mainly, Speaker, will go for the LAPSET. And that is the conclusion and development of the 3 berths in Lamu, Speaker, to then facilitate our fuel, even our crude oil from Turkana to be exported. That is the department, Speaker, of transport. The third department that we oversight is State Department of Maritime Affairs, Mr. Speaker. This State Department, Speaker, has been allocated 1.6 billion. Speaker, the 4th department is State Department for Housing, Urban Development, and Public Works. That, Speaker, has been allocated 32 billion. Speaker, having said that, what are our observations as committee? And these are our humble observations, Speaker. Number 1, out of the 180 billion that is going to roads, I want to thank the Budget Committee for seeing it fit, Mr. Speaker, to allocate, because our initial budget was 170 billion. But this was forgetting one element, which all honorable members and the people of Kenya will agree, Speaker, that there is a problem of roads all over the country. We had rain, we had blessings, Mr. Speaker, but that blessing came with some casualties. And this year, all parts of the country rained. Therefore, every constituency, I made a presentation on behalf of the committee and the ministry, Speaker, to ask for 18 billion, which we surveyed that it was going to be suitable to reconstruct our country back to normal, Mr. Speaker. But the committee was fair enough to us, and they were able to allocate us 8.7 billion, Speaker. What we had recommended and we are recommending to this House, and we are seeking this House approval, that because the whole country, Mr. Speaker, has a problem, we are recommending that every constituency speaker shall receive 30 million of this money, so that honorable members who have problems, honorable members who, according to Article 95 of the Constitution, address each constituency. That gives a total of about 8.7 billion, Mr. Speaker. However, Mr. Speaker, the analysis of this ministry, that is only for reconstructing the country back to normal, Mr. Speaker. But we have the normal building of roads. We have the low-volume seal roads. We have the 10,000 kilometers promised roads, Mr. Speaker. Out of the 10,000 kilometers promised, Speaker, the one that are ongoing is 6,000 kilometers out of 10,000. We have a deficit of 4,000 kilometers. The reason why we have a deficit of 4,000 kilometers, Speaker, is that we don't have the budget. So my committee, in consultation with the ministry, we realized that, Speaker, for us and the people of Kenya to receive the roads in good time, we are asking this parliament to add the ministry 115, the department 115 billion, Mr. Speaker, so that we are able then to conclude the roads in good time. And many people are telling us, how do we propose, or where is this money going to come from? I want to plead with these honorable members. I want to convince them. I want to persuade them, Mr. Speaker, that we had a proposal that allow the ministry or the Department of Infrastructure to issue, through the Treasury, to issue a bond, Mr. Speaker, of 200 billion infrastructure bond. And this time, it should be targeted. It is infrastructure bond, Mr. Speaker. And we have looked at our resources as a department, as a ministry, and we have the resources to securitize the bond, Mr. Speaker. And we have fuel levy. This country is collecting about 65 billion fuel levy every year, Speaker. And if we can tie 10 billion, only 10 billion, Mr. Speaker, from the fuel levy, to be able to manage and service our bond, then this country, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure honorable members, we will deliver the 10,000 kilometers in 4 years, Mr. Speaker. That is our observation. Observation number 2 and recommendation on the road sector is we are asking this House to agree with us. We are proposing then, therefore, Speaker, that the annuity regulation be amended to open that annuity fund, which we have collected about 39 billion so far, Speaker, so that it can allow the ministry and the department to be able to use that money, which is not being used now, to be able to fund other infrastructural programs apart from the PPP that was being targeted, Mr. Speaker. And that is in the infrastructure department. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, our observation on the transport department. What came out, Mr. Speaker, is that the department has purposed, let me go to State Department of Housing. State Department of Housing and Public Works, of course, Mr. Speaker, you know, this is where the 1 million houses is domiciled. However, we have a program of 11 billion this financial year, which is in this budget, Mr. Speaker, which we have presented to you, and we ask honorable members to agree with us. 11 billion is supposed to target urban centers. We call it Kenya Urban Program, Mr. Speaker. We found a problem, and we are asking these honorable members to agree with us, that the 11 billion that is being proposed in the budget, Speaker, it will be spent to improve infrastructure, sewerage, electricity, and urban roads, Mr. Speaker, of 59 urban centers in this country. Of course, honorable members and people of Kenya, where I will be asking, where are these 59 urban centers? The 59 urban centers, Mr. Speaker, are in every county of this country, apart from Nairobi and Mombasa, because of the state where it is. And we wanted to bring the other small urban centers so that it looks like Nairobi in future, or Mombasa in future, Mr. Speaker. And that's where the 59 urban centers are going to be. Our problem, Mr. Speaker, are two. One, the counties then, because these urban committees are not in place, the counties can participate in designing, Mr. Speaker. They can design the programs, submit to the ministry, and then the ministry can be able to proceed, Mr. Speaker, in terms of implementation. If I go, Speaker, to the State Department of Transport, in the State Department of Transport, Mr. Speaker, of course I've mentioned here SGR, let me go on record, and for the people of Kenya as well to understand that we are not only targeting up to Naivasha, as it is for this financial year. We want to target all the way, Mr. Speaker, to the other parts of the country. And therefore, that needs to be on record, Speaker, so that the people of Kenya are not don't misunderstand our targets, Mr. Speaker. However, we are also recommending that department that they should consider the airstrips. Apart from now, this time it is mainly in Western. Next year, they will look at Northeastern and also Northeast, Mr. Speaker. And finally, on the State Department of Maritime Affairs, This is our last born, Speaker. And we're asking this also House to listen with us. We are proposing that they should be added some resources, Mr. Speaker, so that they can then bring them to normal. Finally, I want to conclude, Mr. Speaker, by also thanking a Budget Committee. From where I come from, that is West Pokot County. Budget Committee has recognized and given us an extra 100 million, Mr. Speaker, from the public participation. I want to register my appreciation on behalf of the people of West Pokot, Mr. Speaker, because I'm the only Pokot now speaking here. On their behalf, I want to thank that committee. And I also want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for listening to me and convince these honorable members to pass this budget, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Very well, Mr. Chairman. Honorable members, as you will notice that it is already 1. We have one more committee, Finance and National Planning. We shall not take the committee now, but then becomes the first person to speak in the afternoon. So, Mr. Chairman, Finance and National Planning, we shall push your slot to afternoon when we resume at 2:30 p.m. Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House starts adjourned till today, Wednesday, 6 June 2018 at 2:30 p.m.